I don't know why we're negotiating with the Chinese on one part of a trade deal, which they're going to violate the other part.
I try to make every dollar count. A lot of the time, I'll just wait to feed myself until the end and then just eat whatever leftovers the kids haven't touched.
Voices of concern are growing as influenza spreads. According to the Ministry of Health, Labor and Welfare, 24,276 influenza cases were reported nationwide in 1 week.
In this video, we're going to look at 3 pressures that are shaping the months ahead. Global trade routes that are shifting away from the United States, everyday prices continue to rise, and early flu signals overseas that could strain an already fragile economy and supply chain. Now, none of this is about panic. It's about seeing the pattern early enough, as we've done in the past, to make calm, practical adjustments at home. We're going to break down what's happening, why it matters for your household, and the simple steps that you can take now. We'll also have another great giveaway, and we'll announce last week's winner, so let's jump in. If you're new to this channel, my name is Chris, and on this channel we discuss emergency preparedness, aka prepping. Every week we look at the real stresses forming in the world around us and break them down into the steps that you can take now, long before these disruptions reach your doorstep. The goal is simple. When you understand what's shifting and build a little margin at home, you move through uncertainty with steadiness and clarity, even when the systems we all depend on start to wobble. And because being prepared is the only real way to stay independent, we're starting things off with something that actually strengthens your resilience. A quick heads up about our Black Friday offer that we've been sharing about on the channel over the last several weeks. I've turned off all the YouTube ads for this video to tell you about the City Prepping's Prepper's Roadmap course. You could say I'm sponsoring my own video this week. Now, if you haven't joined the newsletter yet, now's the time. The link is below. We're going to share our Black Friday and Cyber Monday deals here on the channel during Thanksgiving week, but the newsletter subscribers are going to get early access to our Prepper's Roadmap course at a steep, limited time discount. Now, once Cyber Monday wraps up, the course doors are closed for good. So if you've been thinking about it, be sure to check out the link below. All right, so let's get into the stories that influence you. America's sidelined. The first news story is one that many will hear a smattering of in the news cycle, but most won't really connect the dots to a struggling economy, supply chain disruptions, and even higher prices. Now, around the world, companies and countries are redrawing the map of how goods move. You will see the phrase like the Great Supply Chain Reset in business reports. And that's not a slogan. It's a description of a long-term shift away from one big, cheap global pipeline and towards smaller, regional, politically aligned networks that are designed to survive tariffs, global conflicts, trade wars, and sudden disruptions. Now, in this reset, cost is no longer the only driver. Trade bodies are warning that overall global goods trade is expected to shrink slightly in 2025, while North America in particular faces some of the steepest drops in export volumes as new tariffs and trade disputes bite. At the same time, other regions like parts of Asia and Latin America, they are growing their share of trade, deepening relationships with each other and with large buyers like China. Trade's not stopping. It is rerouting around the United States. And behind the scenes, a lot of this comes down to risk. After the pandemic, wars, and repeating shipping shocks, companies want supply chains that are visible and controllable. They are spending heavily on real-time tracking, analytics, and cloud platforms that allow them to see inventory, shipments, and suppliers in one place so that they can redirect quickly when tariffs or disruptions hit. If there's a problem at the port of Long Beach, New York, or Charleston, companies can simply reroute, change orders to other ports of call or other countries with a lightning-fast, touch-of-a-speed button. Now, while policies may shift over weeks and months, inventory can shift or be rerouted in seconds. They're also spreading manufacturing across multiple regions rather than betting everything on one country or one trade route. Now, here's a part that matters for us. Many of these new trade routes do not center on the United States. Some of them deliberately avoid us. Long-running tariff fights and reciprocal tariffs have pushed larger buyers to seek cheaper, more predictable suppliers elsewhere. The World Trade Organization has warned that current tariff policies are diverting trade flows away from North America and could deepen a contraction in global goods trade if they escalate further. You can see that clearly in soybeans. China used to be a massive buyer of American soybeans, but this year Chinese buyers have turned mainly to Brazil and Argentina instead. A combination of retaliatory tariffs, value-added taxes, and regular duties has pushed the total duty on American soybeans up into the mid-30s, which makes United States crops significantly more expensive than South American beans. Now, reports this fall show the United States soybean soybean harvest started with minimal orders from China, while Brazil set export records and Argentina cut export taxes to undercut American prices. This has created a glut of South American soybeans in China, lowering prices and limiting U.S. export recovery despite trade deal commitments, with analysts warning that the window for significant U.S. sales is rapidly closing. That leaves American farmers with full bins, lower prices, and fewer buyers. Many will still plant soybeans next year, even though they cannot afford to keep producing at a break-even or a loss, especially if the revised deals should falter. That doesn't just hurt farmers. Soy is a foundation for animal feed, cooking oil, and biofuels. And when production swings down after a glut, it can later show up as higher prices for meat, eggs, and fuel. Soybean is just the most glaring example. It is a small window into what it looks like when the world quietly routes around you. When the United States trade deficit shrinks, it's often misunderstood as a sign of stronger exports or better trade deals. But in reality, recent reductions have mainly resulted from lower import volumes due to high tariffs and decreased orders for American goods, not from improved export performance or fair economic terms. A similar story to the soybeans is playing out in higher tech materials and components. Tariffs and export controls are hitting critical minerals, batteries, solar components, and certain electronics. And international agencies note that governments are using tariffs, subsidies, and industrial policy to lock in control over energy transition supply chains from rare earths and lithium to advanced chips. And that introduces significant uncertainty for countries that rely on imports of these items, including the United States. What does this mean to us? These are disasters of our future that creep up so slowly that they still shock us when they finally arrive. When you hear the phrase American sideline, it doesn't mean that the United States disappears from trade. It just simply means that we are no longer the automatic default hub through which everything flows as it did in the past. That counts for the United States dollars as a default currency of the future as well. And when trade blocs form elsewhere and buyers lock in long-term deals with other suppliers, we get fewer options and less leverage. At the household level, that often shows up as fewer choices on the shelf, longer waits for restocks, and prices that jump faster and fall more slowly, especially on things that travel a long way to reach us. Most people experience a great supply chain reset as noise in the background, occasional shortages, a part that is backordered, a favorite brand that quietly disappears, even a weird drop in the price of soybeans, and a one-year glut of them on the market. And that is a slow-motion version of what trade bodies are already warning about, a world where tariffs and fragmented trade policy reduce overall trade and increase volatility, especially for regions caught in the middle of larger disputes. For preppers and practical planners, the goal is not to predict every twist in global trade. The goal is to admit that we are in a transition period and bring a few of those long, fragile supply lines closer to home. That starts with awareness. Look around your home and ask which things are clearly imported or heavily dependent on imported components or resources. Laptops and phones are obvious, but think simpler. Rechargeable batteries and power banks, solar charge controllers, inverters, handheld radios, and small tools with circuit boards. Specialty oils and chemicals, some foods like coffee, tea, and certain grains. Those are the items that fill every trimmer when shipping, tariffs, or currency swings hit. If you already know that you're going to need certain imported items in the next 6 to 12 months, you might want to consider buying them one cycle early while prices still reflect today's conditions rather than next year's tariffs and shortages. And this is not about debt or panic buying, but about looking ahead at what you will realistically need and securing it before pressure builds. Now, at the same time, do not depend on a single online retailer. Local hardware stores, farm supply shops, and regional brands, they often have different distributors and can source parts even when big outlets show long delays. In many cases, a slightly more expensive regional product that is actually available is a better choice. So keep a simple written list of the imported or hard to replace items your household relies on, how many you have, and how long they last. And when you see headlines about tariffs, trade restrictions, or shipping disruptions, treat them like a storm forecast and use them as your cue to quietly add a little margin before shortages reach your doorstep. Next week, I'm going to be walking you through 10 specific items and categories that I'm watching closely as we move toward January 1st of 2026. And if you want a clear checklist of what to consider getting ahead of the reset, make sure you are subscribed to the channel so you don't miss that video. For now, start with 1 or 2 imported items that really matter to your household and bring a little more of that supply chain under your control. So, are you starting to feel these trade shifts where you live? Which imported item would hit your household the hardest if it became scarce? What small change are you making this week to stay ahead of it? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Pressure at checkout. So what is the actual state of the economy right now? Well, it depends on who you listen to. It is either running hot or sliding toward something more fragile. Now, most households do not think in terms of indexes, stock market futures, or political talking points. They think in terms of the grocery bill, the rent, the car payment, and whether their income reaches far enough. And on that ground level, the signals are remarkably consistent. Food prices are still rising, households are stretching, stores are shifting strategy, and the margins families used to rely on, they're thinning. The latest federal data shows grocery prices rising month after month across most major categories. Staples like coffee, bananas, and beef, they have been some of the steepest jumps. Economists point to several overlapping drivers. Tariffs have added cost of goods that the United States imports heavily. Labor constraints in agriculture and food processing have raised costs for producers. And climate pressures on crops and cattle have created shortages that ripple all the way down the supply chain. None of these forces moves quickly, they stack. And together they help explain why a simple grocery run now costs noticeably more than it did even a few months ago. Households are responding. Surveys show that more than half of Americans now rank grocery prices as a major stress point, even above housing or healthcare. And many families are visiting multiple stores to hunt for sales. People are buying fewer discretionary items and shifting to cheaper store brands. Some are skipping meat entirely in certain weeks. And major retailers say customers are making more small trips instead of big basket shops because they are watching every dollar. Retail analysts call this the $1 economy. Every purchase requires justification, and every price increase lands a little heavier. And it doesn't bode well as we head into the holiday shopping season. Now, behind the scenes, retailers are struggling with the same pressures. Input costs are up. Tariffs have reshaped supply chains. Some major chains are closing stores or cutting staff, and others are remodeling to chase sales. But even with those adjustments, price relief is limited. Food industry analysts say that the increases since 2019 now reflect deep structural shifts. Weather volatility, higher production costs, and a more fragmented global supply chain mean that many of the prices will level off rather than return to their old normal. Stability, not reversal, is the best case scenario that many experts now describe. Tariffs also show up in another key number, the United States trade deficit. Recent reports show the deficit dropping sharply in late summer, not because exports surged, but because imports fell as companies front-loaded orders ahead of new tariffs. Lower imports can appear positive on paper, but for consumers, they often mean tighter supply and higher prices. And when fewer goods come in, scarcity builds. And when tariffs layer on already tight supply chains, the end result is the same one that shoppers are seeing today: higher prices for everyday items from electronics to food to tools. All of this creates mixed headlines. Some indicators look strong and others look fragile. Some economists highlight robust corporate investment. Others warn that manufacturing has contracted for several consecutive months. Some point to a strong stock market. Others point out that many households are carrying record credit card balances and are falling behind on medical or student loan payments. Different groups experience the economy very differently, and that is why today's debate sounds so contradictory. How well we are doing and will do in the future are two different pictures depending on who you listen to, but how we're doing right now, that's evident with every purchase. For many families, the question is simpler. Does the paycheck stretch as far as it did last year? For a growing number, the answer is no. So what does that mean to us? This is where preparedness becomes a practical financial hedge, not a reaction to headlines. When prices rise slowly but steadily, the households that store basic staples track what they use and buy ahead. When costs are stable, they feel less of that pressure. A bag of rice, beans, lentils, or a case of soup bought at last month's price is money saved this month. A stock pantry means fewer last-minute trips when prices spike. Buying a small supply of the shelf-stable items you already use is not political. It's a simple way of insulating your budget from a system that has become more volatile and more expensive. You don't need to absorb every statistics to see the trend. Essential items, they cost more. Volatility is higher. Supply chains are slower to recover when something breaks. Preparedness turns those realities into manageable problems. So start with the foods that you already cook. Add a little margin to your pantry. Build a small buffer of proteins, beans, grains, and staples that store well. We'll do a video about this actual process of how you store and what to store here in a couple of weeks. These are practical steps that help any household stay steady when the economy sends mixed signals. If you have felt the squeeze at the store, you're not imagining it. And if you are looking for a way to bring a little more predictability back in your life, preparedness is one of the simplest tools that you have at your disposal. Let me know in the comments how prices look where you live and what steps you are taking to stretch your household margin. How is prepping completing the picture for you in the current economy? Hidden strains. If you've been with this channel since late 2019, you might remember when we walked through how a respiratory outbreak could move from a headline on the other side of the world to empty shelves and disrupted hospitals here at home months before the first confirmed COVID cases in the United States hit. Now, that was not because we can see into the future. It's because we take public health signals seriously and we watch how they interact with supply chains and the broader economy. Now, my undergraduate degree from the University of Texas was in microbiology, and for me, this is a very interesting subject that I keep a close eye on. The flu season is giving some of the early signals again. Japan has already declared a nationwide influenza epidemic about 5 weeks earlier than usual, more than 6,000 confirmed cases and hundreds of hospitalizations, many of them children. Schools have closed, hospitals are feeling the strain, and the virus is spreading across multiple prefectures instead of staying localized to just one city. What has experts watching closely is not just the timing, but the type of flu that is showing up. A newer offshoot of H3N2 called subclade K emerged after this year's flu vaccines were already locked in. It has already helped drive early and intense seasons in places like Australia, the United Kingdom, and now Japan. Genetic changes in this strain may make it better at slipping past some of the antibodies people built from last year's infections or this year's flu shot. What this does not mean is that the vaccine is useless. Early data from the UK suggests that the current shot is already reducing the risk of ending up in the hospital, especially for children, even if more people may get infected in the first place. Now, here in the United States, the official surveillance picture is murkier than it really should be. Budget fights and the recent shutdown have disrupted some of the normal national reporting, which makes it harder for us to really see the full pattern in real time. And on top of that, the CDC's main vaccine advisory panel was completely turned over earlier this year, which has introduced some uncertainty and has slowed the usual flow of clear, consistent guidance around shots, including flu vaccines. State and local reports still give us a partial view, and what they show us so far is that flu activity is actually starting to climb. Most of the viruses being typed are influenza A, and the growing share of those are H3N2. And about half of the H3N2 samples that have been characterized are already from the subclade K family. In plain language, the same strain that pushed Japan and the UK into an earlier season is here and is starting to move. We also have to remember that flu does not arrive alone anymore. We're heading into another respiratory season where influenza, COVID, and RSV, they all circulate at the same time. Last winter was the first year since COVID that flu reclaimed the top spot for overall impact, and H3N2 years tend to hit older adults particularly hard. Now, the concern this time is not that we're on the edge of another global lockdown or a once-in-a-century pandemic. The concern is that an early H3N2 heavy season could again push hospitals, clinics, and already thin staffing to their limits while the economy is dealing with higher prices, tariff-driven supply shocks, and fragile consumer spending. So when nurses, grocery workers, teachers, truck drivers, warehouse staff, and other essential workers are out sick in larger numbers, it really slows everything down. Classrooms struggle to stay open, hospitals get backed up, deliveries take longer, and businesses, they run short-staffed. All of that amplifies the supply chain strain and the broader economic pressures that we've been talking about in the first two stories. What does this mean to us? From a preparedness standpoint, flu is not an abstract public health topic. It is one more stressor on systems that are already under load. And when absenteeism starts in warehouses, grocery stores, meat plants, hospitals, and service jobs, it shows up as slower deliveries, thinner shelves, and longer waits for basic care. And when families are already stretched by higher food and fuel costs, a week or two of missed work can push a tight budget into real trouble. Flu doesn't cause supply chain resets or tariff shocks, but it stacks on top of them and makes the whole system a little more brittle. This is where practical prepping matters. You cannot control which strain spreads or how well the vaccine matches this year, but you can control how much margin your household has to ride out a wave of illness. And that starts with health basics. If your doctor recommends it, a flu shot will still lower the odds of ending up in the hospital. And this is also the time to quietly rebuild your sick room supplies before everyone else is looking for the same items. Fever reducers, cough medicine, electrolyte drinks, tissues, thermometers, basic cleaners, and simple PPE. And if you have kids or older relatives, think about how you would handle a week at home or how you would separate someone who is sick from those who are more at risk. Flu is also a reminder to shore up your basic buffers. If you know you have to keep going to work even while people around you are sick, having 2 or 3 weeks of simple, shelf-stable, easy-to-prepare food at home means that you don't also have to stand in long lines when you feel lousy or when stores are short-staffed. A modest stock of mask, hand soap, and sanitizer lets you dial your own risk level up or down as conditions change without waiting on a shipment that might be delayed. None of this is about fear or reliving 2020. It's about recognizing that in a world of economic shocks, trade disruptions, and fragile logistics, even an ordinary virus in an ordinary year can be the thing that pushes a strained system over the edge in your local area. Flu seasons are notoriously hard to predict, and no one can tell you exactly how this is going to play out. What you can do is treat the early wave abroad and the emerging data at home as useful warning shots. In the same way as we encourage you over the years to prepare for a pandemic before it was a household word, I'm encouraging now to take a calm week or two and close a few gaps before this flu season really sets in. A little preparation for a common virus can buy you margin when the uncommon problems arrive. So, how about you? Have you already been sick this season, or are you sick now? What precautions are you taking for this season? Let us know in the comments below. Giveaway. This week's winner is going to receive a pair of long-range walkie-talkies, perfect for communicating even when the lines are down. All you have to do to participate in the giveaway is just simply comment on the video, give it a thumbs up, and complete the form linked in the description section below. Giving the video a thumbs up helps us to spread the prepping message even further. You also need to complete the forms to be eligible, since that's how we randomly pick a winner and contact you. And the information is only accessible to our team here at City Prepping. Using a random selection tool, we'll choose a winner from the entrance and reach out to you via the email that you provided on the submitted form. So congrats to our last giveaway winner for the rechargeable emergency light bulbs, Steve Darnell. We'll reach out to you shortly to get that sent to you. As I always like to do at the end of these videos, I'd just like to kind of share a word of encouragement and just share what I've been working on. For me, there's not necessarily a segment about what I've been working on, but just kind of more of a personal message here. I just turned 50 this past week at the time of recording this video. And hitting that milestone, it has a way of making you look both backwards and forward at the same time. You start thinking about what you learned, what you built, and the kind of impact that you want to make with whatever years you get ahead of you. And it's felt a lot different than 40, I'll put it that way. 50 feels more, I'm starting to feel my mortality, I'll put it that way. I'm starting to realize, the years I have ahead of me, but I'm incredibly optimistic. I've been fortunate to have a few regrets in life, and I'm trying to live in a way that I don't have any moving forward. So for me, that reflection, it keeps bringing me back here to this channel, this mission, and the work of helping ordinary people build more stability in an uncertain world. And I don't think the world is getting simpler from here. As I always say, I'm not a cynic as much as I try to be a realist. And the pressures that we talk about every week on this channel, whether it be trade shifts, rising prices, fragile systems, they're not going to go away. But I've also seen something just as real. What happens when people take small, steady steps toward greater self-reliance. It changes households, it lowers stress, it gives people back a sense of control at a time when everything else feels unpredictable. And that's why I'm committed to growing this channel, our website, and the tools and products that I'm building. Not as hype, not as fear, but as practical ways to help you actually use in your day-to-day life. And I want to keep creating things that make your path clear, your home stronger, and your decisions more confident. But for this video, I want to leave you with something simple. Wherever you are in your journey, whether you're just starting or refining what you already have, don't underestimate the power of the next small step. You don't need a perfect plan, you just need momentum. One skill, one improvement, one area brought under your control. If 50 has taught me anything, it's that progress is rarely loud or dramatic. It's quiet, it's consistent, and I feel the decisions I've made over my life. I've tried to prioritize health, and I'm glad I did. These decisions, they add up in ways that you don't notice until you look back and realize you've built something solid. So keep going, keep steady, build at your pace, and remember, you're more capable, more resourceful, and more resilient than you might think. If you want to keep building your preparedness, I would encourage you to check out a couple of videos I've linked here on the side of the screen in the description and comment section below that will really help you out. The first is a pandemic preparedness walkthrough that we just released before COVID. It's an older video, but the principles are timeless and still useful as we enter a heavy flu season. The second is one of the most recent videos that breaks down 9 overlooked grid-down communication tools that you can keep connected when everything else goes quiet. Together, they give you both health and communication sides of staying ready when systems start to strain. As always, stay safe out there.